We're going to do the second scenario, which is for wide world importers. And we're going to go ahead and discuss their data solution. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you for meeting with me today. I have looked over your data recovery needs, and based on the information that you gave me, what I'm going to recommend is that we start always, every time we start with a data recovery plan, we start with a full backup of your database. So we want to make sure that we capture everything and have that as a base to go back to in case, God forbid, anything happens. But we just want to make sure that we start from that. Now, from the discussions that we've had, I get the idea that your data seems to be coming in fast and furious. In that case where you're dealing with so many new transactions on a regular basis, I'm going to suggest that we do very regular backups. And by that, I mean, I'm going to say that we do a full backup of the database no less than once a day. Just to make sure that we are not losing any data at all and that we're being able to keep all of that data as current as possible. If, as you said, costs are not really a challenge or a block for you, I might even suggest, just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep that data up to date, then I would suggest that we do a full backup maybe every 12 hours. But at the very least, we want to be doing it every 24. Now, in addition to that, that's not the only solution. In addition to that, I would suggest that we be doing differential backups at least every 2 to 3 hours. I would feel comfortable with 3, but 2 might be a little bit better, depending on how much you're concerned about data loss or making sure that that data is always available. But at least I would suggest that we do a differential backup probably every 3 hours, just to make sure that we're not losing any data. I also wouldn't stop there. I would go ahead and I would make sure that we're doing transaction log backups. And really, if the concern is loss of data and that storage is not a concern, I would then be doing a transaction log backup probably every 10 to 15 minutes, just to make sure that with the sheer volume of data that we're getting, that we're not losing anything. And at most, we've only got 10 or 15 minutes worth of data that we're going to have to recreate. So that way, it gives you the most security that you can really get to make sure that your data is always going to be available for you. The last thing that I'm going to recommend is that there are 3 types of databases, 2 of which we're concerned with today. To do this model that I have set up, we're going to need to set your database up as a full database versus a simple database. And I'll show you kind of why I would recommend that. So let me just kind of go through an example that would help you to see this a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a couple of databases. We're going to create these are just dummy databases that they are here just so I can show you an example. There's nothing really, super about them. But we're going to create one as a full database. Like I discussed, this is going to have full backup or data recovery options. The other one is a simple database, which will have a couple of restrictions, one of which is just hugely important to us in this particular scenario. So let's go ahead. I just ran that. You can see that it completed successfully. If I go over here and look at my database report, I can just refresh that, and I can now see that I have the full and the simple databases both here in my list of databases. So that's good. Right now they're empty. There's nothing in them. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a table. It's just a very simple table, just has an ID entry and some text, a column of just text information. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And completed that. So if we go and just look at the full database, for example, and we go and look at the table view, we can see that we did, in fact, add that table, and that it just has a couple of columns, the ID column and some text. Not really all that exciting. If I were to run a report on it, it would just simply look like that. Woo. Okay, great. All right, we've got this database. I want to make sure we have a good place to start before we start inputting any data. So just as a good practice, I am going to go ahead and I am going to run a backup of these 2 databases. And what you can see here, we can see here that we have the full database backup and the simple database backup. And we're going to record the time that we did that backup. But this is something that I like to do to make sure that I always am aware of when I did something. And this is going to become important because one of the advantages to the full database over the simple database type for data recovery models is that the full database recovery model allows me to do point-in-time recoveries, whereas the simple does not. That's going to be important, so let's keep that in mind. So we're going to record the time and date. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert some data into this file. It's just dummy data, doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can see that what this means now is that I've got 10 rows of data, and that's very easy to see. If I come over here, I've got this little thing here that's all set up for me. So if I execute that, you can see that the full database has 10 rows of information, and that if I do the same for the simple database, there it is, bam, I've got 10 rows of information. So very good, very cool. We're ready to move on. So now what I'm going to do is what's called a differential backup. This backup only records the information that happened from the time of the last backup till now. And both database types can do this. So I'm going to run that. And it executes. You see that it executed well. If we look in the backup folder, you can see that we now have these DFF files. That's for the differential backup, in addition to the 2 backup files. All right. So good information. We've now got all of our information backed up through the 10 entries that we put in. And again, I'm going to record the time and the date to make sure that I've got that information should it become necessary for me to do anything with it. It's always good to have information. More information is always better than less information. All right, I'm going to add 5 more transactions to the database. Again, these are not important, but I'm going to go ahead and execute that. You'll see that the number of rows has changed from 10 to 15 in both databases. And again, if I come over here and I run the queries to see what's in there, you can see I've got my original 10, plus I now have 5 additional ones in the full database. And if I come here, I have the same thing in the simple database. All right, now what I want to do is, this is part of the normal process of the day, do whatever's going on. I'm going to do a transaction log backup. Now this is a small backup that really just looks at all of the transactions that have occurred between the last backup and right now. It takes up very little space, less space than the differential, which takes up less space than the full. And I am going to go ahead and I am going to back up both databases. I'm going to attempt to do both databases. It's important to pay attention to what's going to happen here real quick. So I execute that, and the first one, the full database, gets backed up. Everything happens successfully, but we get this error. And this is important because we set it up as a simple database. What happened here is that it says backup log is not allowed with the recovery model simple. This is going to become important in a minute. All right, so again, I'm going to record the time and date. Make sure I've got that. And now, let's say something really big happens. In this case, for our fake database, we get our very first $1 million sale. This is huge, it's big, it's important. We want to make sure that that gets inserted into our database. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. And I'm going to execute that. You notice we went from 15 rows to 16 rows. And if I do my little search here, you can see there's my sale for my full database for the $1 million sale. And again, the same for my simple database. All right. I'm going to record this time. This is going to be important. So I'm going to erase this. And I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right there. And now somebody came along, new database administrator. He accidentally deletes the $1 million sale from our database. And now you'll see that, oh no, we went from 16 rows to 15 rows. We've lost that information. And that, again, I want to record that information. This is going to be a key one. This is really going to be important, because this is when the transaction, the deletion occurred, or the last good backup that we had. And this is when the deletion occurred. So we're going to delete that information. I'm going to copy this information, and we're going to put that in there. So Hugely important. We want to make sure that we look at when did this transaction happen. And we're going to notice that it happened at 12:16 and 54 seconds. So that gives us a place where we can start from. That'll be important in a second. But then as part of our regular maintenance, we have the backup happen. The transaction log backup happens. We're going to go ahead and execute that because, we didn't know that something bad happened at the time. For the full database, you can see backup, differential. There's our first transactional. There's our second transactional. But again, down here in simple, we only have the two backups, just the differential and the full backup that we did. No transactionals. So the backups are now completed. So now we have a problem. If we go back to our databases, we can see that we are missing that $1 million sale. And that's a huge thing for us. We need to have that data. So what we are going to do is we are going to back up our database from the backup files. So the way that we can do that is, let's start with the full database. We're going to go over here and we're going to go to tasks and we're going to go to restore database. Now, first thing I want to do is we understood that there was a time that this all occurred. Let's go back. Oops happened at 12:16, but our last backup that was good before that was at 12:15. So this 12:16 is going to become important. So let's look at that. We're going to start from 12:16 and it was 12:16 and 54 seconds. So we're going to come back here and we are going to look at our timeline and we're going to say, okay, what I want is I want to do a specific time and date and I want to back up from 12:16, but I want to get a little bit before the error happens. So I'm going to just go back to 12:16 itself. I'm going to click on OK. And what that is going to do is it's going to put a stop to the transactional database backup or restore. It's going to say, don't do anything after this time frame. And if you want to see what that looks like, let me finish setting this up. So one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to overwrite the production database. So I'm going to do the restore. I'm going to do it as a restored database. So it'll still be the same information, and I can then use this to update the full production database, but I'm going to call it restored. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take this tail log backup. I don't need that. And then I'm going to show you what the important part is. The important part is this. Here are the backup logs. I'm going to back up from the backup, the differential, the first transactional log, and then from the second transactional log, but only up till that 12:16 time that I noticed that we recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We've got everything that we want. It's called full database restored. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and execute that. And this is good news. We've now restored the database in full. And if we come over here and we look through the restored database, we can see here it's got everything. It's got my table. And when I do a table view, we have all 16 rows, including the $1 million sale. All right, so why is all of that so important? Well, here's why. So let's take a look at the simple database. Simple database is still missing that information. Remember, we came over here and we saw that it didn't have it. So I am going to go back to the simple database. We're going to go to tasks and we're going to go to restore. And I'm going to go to database. Now, even though I know the time that the error happened, again, we said it was 12. Remember, go back here. We said that it happened at 12:16. So I know that that's the time point that I want to go for. We'll go, okay. And it's going to look at, okay, well, I've grabbed the two files that I have, the full backup and the differential backup. Those are the two backup files that I have. And we are going to restore the database. And it's going to restore just fine. See, restored just fine. But when we come back over here and we look at the information that we restored from, because we didn't have those transactional backups that literally gave us what happened up to the minute, when I go to do my report from here, I'm going to see that not only did I lose the $1 million sale, but I lost all of the transactions from 11 to 15 that we did in the middle of the day. And so that's why I'm recommending that we do a full backup plan instead of doing a simple backup plan. Hope that works. Thanks. Let me know. Have a good one.